Hi everyone. So today we're going to move on to our second topic, matter. So, what is matter? You can find out by watching this video. I've posted the link on OLE, so so you can access the video from there. And then I want you to make notes. What is matter? What are the three states of matter? And what is an example of each state of matter? So, you should have found out that all matter is made up of tiny particles. For example, this hammer, the nail, and the wood, they're all made up of tiny particles. The plant, the leaf, and even the tiny droplets of water, they're made up of matter. The balloon, the string, and the air inside the balloons, they're made up of particles. But we can't see these particles because they're incredibly small. For example, in this 1 tablespoon of water, there are about 600 billion trillion water molecules. That's quite a lot of water molecules. Now, the particles can exist as either atoms, molecules, or ions. Atoms can be, anything from the periodic table. Hydrogen, oxygen, lithium, beryllium, boron, carbon, you name it. Molecules are 2 or more atoms bonded together. For example, we have water molecules, which is made up of hydrogen and oxygen atoms bonded together. Carbon dioxide gas, that's in a molecule because it's made up of carbon and oxygen atoms bonded together. We also have ions. I won't go into details, but just know that they are charged particles. Positively charged or negatively charged particles. Depending on the state of matter, liquid, gas, or solid, particles can be arranged differently. So for example, if we say this, 1 brick represents 1 particle, the particles can be arranged orderly or disorderly or randomly, depending on the fate or the state of the matter. So, I want you to write these 2 bullet points in your science book so you can pause this video. So, matter is anything that has a mass and takes up space. That is the definition. And remember that matter is made up of particles, atoms, ions, or molecules. So, you should know that matter can exist in 3 states: gas, liquid, and solid. And I want you to write that bullet point in your science book. And now we're going to be discussing about different properties of gas, liquid, and solid. So let's talk about attraction between particles. Solids have strong forces holding the particles together. So the particles don't really move apart from each other. In liquid, particles are held together by weak bonds. The particles move past each other, but they're still loosely held together. In gas, there is a weak force holding particles together, but the particles can move a lot. They're more like they're not really held together. Now, particles are always vibrating, and it doesn't matter if it's solid, liquid, or gas. Particles are constantly vibrating and moving. In solid, the particles vibrate very slowly. In liquid, the particles vibrate and are able to move around each other. They can slide past each other. In gas, the particles move very, very quickly. Now, compressibility and volume are the 2 properties that we're going to be discussing. Compressibility refers to the ability to push particles closer together. And when we compress, it decreases the overall volume. And how much we can compress depends on the space between particles. If we see the animation on the right, the guy is compressing the container. We have about 9 particles, and as we compress, those particles come close together, and the overall volume is decreasing. The reason why they can be compressed is because there's so much space between each particles. But imagine if we had, 30 particles in that container. It would be harder to compress because there's less space between the particles. Volume refers to the amount of space the matter takes up, and it depends on the attraction of particles, attraction between particles, and energy between particles. So let's talk about compressibility first. In solid, there's essentially no space between particles. In liquid, even though particles can move past each other, there is still no space between particles. And in gas, there is lots and lots of space between particles. So, solid is not compressible, nor is liquid, but gas is compressible. Okay, let's move on to volume and shape. In solid, there are strong forces holding the particles together, and the particles don't move apart much. They vibrate, but they don't really move apart from each other, and they can't slide past each other. But in liquid, there are weak forces holding the particles together, but the particles can move past each other. And in gas, there are very weak forces holding particles together, and the particles can move apart very easily. So, solid retains a fixed volume and a fixed shape. Liquid takes the shape of the container. For example, if we pour water into a cup, then it'll take the shape of the cup. If we pour the water into a conical flask, then it'll take the shape of the conical flask. Okay, gas occupies the whole volume of the container, and it has no fixed shape. This is the second video I want you to watch. The link is also on OLE, so check that out. Okay, so I have made a summary table of all the properties we discussed today, and this is the Word doc is on OLE, so you can print the table and glue that into your book. So let's have a look. So before I go into the properties we discussed, I just want you to know that particles of a certain type do not change size. What does that mean? So in water, all the water molecules have identical size. In sugar, the sugar molecules have identical size. In carbon dioxide gas, all the carbon dioxide gas molecules have the same size. Okay, let's go into particle attraction. So as we have discussed, in solids, particles are held together strongly and they don't move apart, except vibrating slightly. In liquids, particles are held together weakly and they do move around. Gases, particles have very weak attraction and they're able to move in all directions freely. Okay, volume. Solids have fixed volume because the particles are held close together. Liquids have fixed volume as well because the particles are still held together. But gases, they don't have fixed volume because the particles are not held together and they just move freely. Solids have fixed shape because the particles can't move around except vibrating slightly. Liquids take the shape of the part of the container it occupies, as the particles can move around freely. So it does change its shape depending on the container. And gases have no fixed shape because, just like liquids, the particles can move around freely. And lastly, solids cannot be compressed because of the little space between particles. Liquids also can't be compressed because the little space between particles. But gases can be compressed because there's a lot of space between particles. Okay, so that's it for today. I hope you guys learnt what matter is, the 3 different phases or states of matter, and different properties of matter. If you have any questions, do ask me through email and I'd be happy to help you out. Okay, thank you guys.